I stood in Brad's office at Denver International Airport, watching him lean back in his leather chair with that smug expression I'd grown to despise. The man who'd once begged me to give our relationship another chance now held my termination papers like a trophy. "Pack up your desk, Carrie," he said, sliding the documents across his polished mahogany surface. "My fiancée Emma is taking over your position starting Monday morning." 16 years of my life flashed before my eyes every sleepless night during blizzards. Every holiday spent rerouting flights. Every crisis I'd solved while he took credit upstairs. He expected tears. Maybe. Pleading. Instead, I calmly removed my master access card from my wallet and placed it next to his coffee mug. "Good luck, Brad. You'll need it in about 10 minutes when the morning rush hits." Walking through the terminal toward the parking garage, I felt strangely calm despite the earthquake that had just demolished my career. My phone started buzzing before I reached my car, Brad's ringtone playing that annoying classic rock song he thought made him seem cool. I silenced it and kept walking. The drive home took 23 minutes through downtown Denver traffic, and by the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I had 17 missed calls, all from Brad. The irony wasn't lost on me that the man who just fired me was already desperate for my help. Settling onto my couch with a cup of chamomile tea, I allowed myself to remember how this all began. Fresh out of Colorado State University with a degree in logistics and supply chain management, I'd started at Mountain Sky Airlines as an intern, making $8.50 per hour. The company was struggling, then outdated computer systems, constant delays, and a reputation for losing luggage that kept passengers choosing competitors. I threw myself into learning every aspect of airline operations. While other interns filed papers and fetched coffee, I studied flight patterns, analyzed weather data, and shadowed veteran employees during their shifts. Within 6 months, I'd identified 12 critical inefficiencies in our routing system. My supervisor at the time, a kind woman named Margaret who'd since retired, encouraged me to present my findings to upper management. That presentation changed everything. My proposed route optimization system reduced average delays by 37% and saved the company over $2 million annually. I was promoted to junior operations coordinator at 21, then senior coordinator at 24. By 28, I was running the entire operations department. The real test came during the Christmas Eve blizzard 5 years ago. 3 feet of snow shut down highways across Colorado, and our competitors canceled every flight. Brad, who was just a middle manager then, wanted to follow suit. But I saw an opportunity. Using my knowledge of wind patterns and runway conditions, I worked for 36 hours straight to keep modified schedules running. We were the only airline operating that weekend, and grateful passengers booked with us exclusively for months afterward. That success launched Mountain Sky from a regional carrier struggling to survive into one of the most reliable airlines in the western United States. Our on-time performance rating jumped from 62% to 94% under my system. Customer satisfaction scores soared. Stock prices tripled. And through it all, Brad climbed the corporate ladder by taking credit for innovations I'd developed during countless unpaid overtime hours. My phone rang again. This time it was the main operations line. I glanced at the time, 9:15 a.m., peak morning traffic. I smiled and let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, the local news interrupted regular programming with a breaking story. Massive delays at Denver International Airport as computer systems failed during morning rush hour. Hundreds of flights grounded. Thousands of passengers stranded. The camera showed chaos I'd never seen in 16 years. Gate displays flickered randomly between different flight numbers. Baggage carousels sat motionless while confused travelers clustered around information desks. Security lines stretched back to the parking garage entrances. A field reporter interviewed frustrated passengers. "We've been sitting on the runway for 2 hours," complained a businessman heading to Phoenix. "The pilot says they don't have clearance to take off, but nobody can tell us why." An elderly woman traveling to visit her grandchildren looked exhausted. They moved our gate 3 times, then told us the flight might be canceled. We've been here since 5 a.m. The reporter's voice carried over shots of overwhelmed airline employees. Mountain Sky Airlines, typically known for exceptional punctuality, appears to be experiencing system-wide technical difficulties. Airport officials report this is their worst operational day in recent memory. My phone started ringing again. Brad's number. Then Janet from Flight Control. Then Patricia Hayes, the CEO herself. I turned off the ringer and watched the disaster unfold on television. The twist that made my blood run cold came during the news update 30 minutes later. The reporter announced that Mountain Sky's stock had dropped 18% in morning trading as word spread about the operational collapse. But worse, passengers were demanding full refunds and threatening to never fly with us again. This wasn't just about my job anymore. This was about the livelihood of 800 employees who'd trusted me to keep their airline running smoothly. By noon, I needed coffee and perspective. The Red Rock Cafe sat 2 miles from the airport, close enough to see planes circling overhead in endless holding patterns. My best friend Sarah worked as a senior systems analyst for the airport authority, and she'd agreed to meet me during her lunch break. Sarah arrived, looking grim, carrying a manila folder thick with documents. "Carrie, you need to see this," she said before even ordering her usual vanilla latte. I did some digging into what Brad's been up to. She spread printouts across our corner table email chains, file access logs, and internal communications dating back 8 months. "Look at these timestamps." Sarah pointed to highlighted entries. "Every weekend when you were updating the route optimization algorithms, Brad was remotely accessing your personal drive." My stomach dropped as I read over her shoulder. Brad had been systematically copying my proprietary software, my weather analysis models, and my crisis management protocols. But the emails revealed something far worse. "Has been presenting your work to Patricia Hayes as his own innovations," Sarah continued. "These messages show him scheduling private meetings with the CEO, claiming Head developed revolutionary routing concepts that could transform the airline industry." I scrolled through Brad's communications with growing disbelief. Head told Patricia that I was becoming resistant to change and difficult to collaborate with. Head suggested that fresh leadership was needed to take Mountain Sky to the next level. Head positioned Emma, with her MBA from Northwestern but zero aviation experience, as a visionary thinker who could modernize our operations. "There's more," Sarah said quietly. "Look at this message from 3 weeks ago." Brad's email to Emma made my hands shake. "Everything is falling into place perfectly. Once Carrie's gone, we'll have complete control over the operations department. Your degree gives you credibility with upper management, and I have all her technical documentation. We can take credit for building the most efficient regional airline in America." The carefully orchestrated betrayal left me speechless. This wasn't an impulsive decision to favor his new fiancée. This was calculated theft of intellectual property combined with character assassination designed to destroy my reputation and steal my life's work. Sarah's phone buzzed with urgent notifications from her aviation monitoring systems. "Carrie, the situation at the airport is getting worse. 2 planes had to abort landings because Emma doesn't understand your wind shear prediction models. She's making decisions based on basic weather reports instead of your comprehensive atmospheric analysis." I looked out the cafe window at the planes circling overhead. Each aircraft carried between 100 and 200 passengers who trusted Mountain Sky to get them safely to their destinations. Emma's inexperience wasn't just causing delays, it was creating dangerous situations. "There's something else," Sarah said, hesitantly. "The FAA sent investigators this morning. If Mountain Sky can't demonstrate operational competency within 72 hours, they'll review our safety certification. We could lose routes to competitors." My phone had been buzzing constantly throughout our conversation. Brad's calls mixed with numbers I recognized from the operations center, gate supervisors, and maintenance chiefs. The people who'd worked alongside me for years were watching their workplace crumble and reaching out to the one person who might be able to fix it. But I wasn't ready to ride to the rescue. Not yet. Not until everyone understood exactly what Brad had cost them through his greed and incompetence. The final twist came when Sarah showed me the last document in her folder, a stock analysis report. Mountain Sky's market value has dropped $43 million since this morning, she said. Investment firms are downgrading their recommendations. If this continues through the weekend, we're looking at potential bankruptcy. 800 jobs, thousands of passengers, 16 years of building something it'd been proud of. All of it balanced on the edge of destruction because one man thought he could steal credit for work he'd never understood. I finished my coffee and made a decision. Sarah, I need you to help me document everything Brad stole. Every algorithm, every protocol, every innovation he's claimed as his own. I'm going to show Patricia Hayes exactly what she's lost. The war was just beginning. That evening, I sat in my apartment watching the disaster reach catastrophic proportions. The 6 o'clock news led with breaking coverage of what reporters were calling the Mountain Sky meltdown. My hands clenched as the anchor described the day's events. What began as computer glitches this morning has escalated into the worst operational failure in Mountain Sky Airlines history. Flights have been canceled across 14 states. Hotels near major airports report being completely booked as stranded passengers seek overnight accommodations. The real shock came when field reporters revealed the details of what had happened around 3 p.m. Emma, apparently trying to prove her competence during the crisis, had overridden safety protocols it established for severe weather operations. Flight 817 bound for Chicago had been cleared for takeoff during deteriorating conditions, despite my written guidelines that specifically prohibited departures when wind shear exceeded 25 knots. The Boeing 737 made it airborne, but atmospheric turbulence over Kansas forced the crew to declare an emergency. They diverted to Kansas City, where they attempted landing 3 times before finally touching down safely on the 4th approach. 214 passengers experienced the most terrifying flight of their lives because Emma didn't understand the meteorological data it spent years learning to interpret. The newscast included shaky cell phone footage from inside the cabin during the aborted landings, passengers screaming, oxygen masks deploying, flight attendants struggling to maintain calm while the aircraft pitched violently in crosswinds. One passenger, a middle-aged teacher from Denver, gave an interview that made my heart ache. I was flying to my daughter's college graduation. We thought we were going to die. That pilot saved our lives. But why were we in that situation in the first place? Why did they let us take off in dangerous weather? Janet Rodriguez, head of flight operations and someone I'd trained personally, called while I was watching the coverage. "Carrie, please." Her voice cracked with exhaustion. "Emma doesn't understand your weather routing system. She's been making decisions based on basic forecasts instead of your atmospheric pressure algorithms. We've had to ground 12 flights because she can't interpret the wind data." I could hear chaos in the background, radio chatter, alarm beeps, and stressed voices overlapping in the control room. "Janet, where's Brad?" Hess locked in his office making phone calls. Emma disappeared around 4 p.m. I think she went home. "Carrie, people are getting hurt because of these decisions. The FAA investigators are documenting everything. They're talking about safety violations and potential criminal negligence." Criminal negligence. Those words hit me like cold water. This had moved far beyond career politics into territory where lives were genuinely at risk. My doorbell rang at 8:30 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw a face I recognized from company newsletters but had rarely spoken to directly: Patricia Hayes, our CEO, standing alone on my doorstep. Patricia looked exhausted, her usually perfect gray hair disheveled and her expensive suit wrinkled. "Carrie, may I come in? We need to talk." I led her to my living room, where financial news channels were still covering Mountain Sky's stock collapse. Patricia glanced at the television, then turned it off before sitting heavily on my couch. "I need to understand what happened," she said quietly. "This morning, we were the most reliable airline in our market. Tonight we're facing federal investigation and potential bankruptcy. Brad tells me you sabotaged our systems before leaving, but everyone else insists you're the only person who can fix this. I studied Patricia's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. Built Mountain Sky from a tiny regional carrier into a respected airline, and now she was watching it collapse in real time. Patricia, I didn't sabotage anything. I handed over my access card and left. The systems failed because Emma doesn't know how to operate them. But Brad said you designed them to be too complicated, that you deliberately made yourself indispensable by creating unnecessarily complex procedures. I pulled out my laptop and opened the route optimization software ID developed. Look at this, I said, turning the screen toward her. These aren't complicated procedures. They're comprehensive safety protocols based on 16 years of data analysis. Emma failed because she doesn't understand aviation meteorology, not because the system is too complex. Patricia stared at the intricate displays, showing wind patterns, pressure systems, and route calculations updating in real time. Brad told me this was industry-standard software that any qualified manager could operate. Brad doesn't understand this system any better than Emma does. Has never operated it successfully on his own. The final devastating piece came when Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me a message from the Federal Aviation Administration. Mountain Sky Airlines has 72 hours to demonstrate operational safety, compliance, or face suspension of operating certificates on 6 major routes. 6 major routes. The backbone of our business. Without them, Mountain Sky would lose 80% of its revenue within a week. Carrie. Patricia's voice barely concealed desperation. I'll double your salary. I'll give you equity in the company. Whatever you want. But we need you back tonight. I looked at this powerful woman who'd built an airline empire, now reduced to begging for help from an employee her management team had fired 12 hours earlier. The irony was profound, but the situation was too serious for satisfaction. Patricia, I'll consider coming back. But there are conditions we need to discuss. Patricia and I talked until nearly midnight, and by the time she left my apartment, the terms of my return were crystal clear. I wouldn't just get my old job back. I'd become vice president of operations with complete authority over hiring, firing, and procedural changes. But more importantly, I wanted accountability. Brad has to go, I told her firmly. Not transferred, not demoted. Terminated for theft of intellectual property and endangering passenger safety. Patricia hesitated. Has been with the company for 8 years. There will be legal complications. Then document everything properly. Sarah Martinez from Airport Authority can provide evidence of his unauthorized access to my personal files. I have emails showing he presented my innovations as his own work. And today's operational failure demonstrates his incompetence in a crisis. What about Emma? I considered this carefully. Emma made dangerous decisions today, but she was put in a position she wasn't qualified for. That's Brad's fault, not hers. She should be removed from operations immediately, but I won't destroy her career. Patricia nodded slowly. And your other demands? Complete control over rebuilding the operations team. I want to hire 2 additional senior coordinators and upgrade our weather analysis systems, plus guaranteed funding for staff training programs. The budget implications are significant. I gestured toward the television, where late-night financial shows were still discussing Mountain Sky's plummeting stock price. Today cost us more money than my proposed improvements would require in 5 years. Patricia, you can either invest in proper operations or watch competitors take our routes while we declare bankruptcy. Patricia left with a promise to call an emergency board meeting first thing Friday morning. I had her word that Brad would be suspended pending investigation and that Emma would be quietly transferred to a non-operational role. But I wasn't done planning. Friday morning at 7 a.m., I was back at Denver International Airport for the first time since my termination. Walking through the terminal felt surreal. Employees I'd worked with for years stopped to greet me, their faces showing relief and hope. Carrie, "Thank goodness you're back," said Miguel, a baggage supervisor who'd started as a part-time loader 10 years ago. Yesterday was a nightmare. Nobody knew what to do when the systems crashed. Linda Chen from gate operations looked exhausted but smiled when she saw me. "Is it true you're taking over as VP? Please tell me Brad is really gone." Word traveled fast in airline operations. By 8 a.m., half the staff knew I'd negotiated my return, and that changes were coming. The real moment of truth came when I walked into the main operations center. The room that should have been buzzing with coordinated activity looked chaotic. Flight status boards displayed incorrect information. Radio communications crackled with confused exchanges between pilots and ground control. Stress emanated from every workstation. Emma sat at my former desk, staring helplessly at computer displays she clearly didn't understand. When she saw me enter, relief and embarrassment crossed her face simultaneously. "Carrie, I'm so glad you're here," she said quietly. "I had no idea how complicated this job really is. Yesterday was the worst day of my life." I studied Emma objectively for the first time. She was obviously intelligent. You don't get an MBA from Northwestern without brains. But intelligence without relevant experience could be dangerous in aviation operations. "Emma, none of this is your fault," I said honestly. "Brad put you in an impossible situation. You were set up to fail." Before she could respond, urgent alarms started blaring throughout the operations center. The main display screen flashed red warnings about Flight 406, our morning departure to Seattle. Janet rushed over with a headset. "Carrie, we have an emergency. 406 is reporting hydraulic problems 20 minutes after takeoff. They need to return immediately. But we don't have clear runway access. There's confusion about landing priorities." This was exactly the kind of crisis that required split-second decisions based on deep operational knowledge. I looked at Emma, who appeared frozen with terror. "Emma, watch and learn," I said, taking the headset. "This is what operations management really looks like." Within 6 minutes, I'd coordinated with air traffic control to clear runway 2-5 left, repositioned 3 incoming flights to alternate approaches, and arranged emergency response teams at the correct terminal positions. Flight 406 landed safely with minor damage that ground crews could repair within 2 hours. The operations center erupted in applause. But I noticed something that made my heart swell. Emma was taking notes, genuinely trying to learn from watching me handle the crisis. "Carrie," she said after things calmed down, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea what Brad was asking me to do. I thought operations management meant scheduling meetings and reviewing reports. I didn't realize you were literally responsible for keeping people alive." The twist that completed my satisfaction came when Patricia called at 11 a.m. The board voted unanimously. Brad's terminated effective immediately. Security is escorting him out of the building. You start as VP on Monday with a salary of $125,000 plus equity. Through the operations center windows, I watched Brad walking across the tarmac toward the parking garage, carrying a cardboard box with his personal belongings. 16 years of building something he'd tried to steal, and it took less than 24 hours for him to lose everything. But my victory felt incomplete. I still had to prove Mountain Sky could recover before the FAA review deadline. The real challenge was just beginning. Monday morning brought a transformation I'd never experienced in 16 years with Mountain Sky. Walking into my new office, a corner space with windows overlooking the runways, felt like stepping into a different life. But first, I had to address the elephant in the room. At 9 a.m., I called an all-hands meeting for the entire operations staff. Word had spread over the weekend about Brad's termination and my promotion, and the conference room buzzed with nervous energy when I entered. "Good morning, everyone," I began, looking at faces I'd worked alongside through countless crises. "I know this has been a difficult week for all of us. Let's talk about what happened and where we go from here." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Tom Brennan, our senior aircraft mechanic, stood up first. "Carrie, we need you to know nobody believed Brad's story about you sabotaging the systems. We've worked with you too long to fall for that. He tried to throw you under the bus, added Susan Walsh, a gate coordinator who'd been with the company for 12 years. But we remembered who was here at 3 a.m. during the ice storm last February. We remembered who covered shifts when people had family emergencies. That wasn't Brad. Lisa Martinez, one of our newest hires, raised her hand tentatively. Carrie, I'm sorry, but I did believe some of what Brad said at first. I didn't know you personally. And he made it sound like you'd become bitter about not getting promoted. But after watching Emma struggle on Thursday, I realized Brad had no idea how this department actually functions. The honesty in Lisa's admission impressed me. Lisa, thank you for being direct. That's exactly the kind of communication we need going forward. The meeting that it expected to take 20 minutes stretched to nearly 2 hours as employee after employee shared their experiences from the previous week. The picture that emerged was devastating for Brad's credibility. Janet Rodriguez described how Brad had panicked during the first system crash, demanding she just fix it without understanding what was broken. He kept yelling about deadlines and stock prices, while Emma stared at displays she couldn't read. Meanwhile, passengers were trapped on planes sitting on the runway. Miguel from baggage operations revealed something that made my blood boil. Brad told us you'd programmed the luggage sorting system to fail automatically if you weren't here to monitor it. He said you were trying to hold the company hostage. But anyone who understands the software knows that's impossible. David Park from maintenance added. He actually suggested we should ignore your safety protocols because they were overly cautious. He wanted us to approve aircraft for takeoff without completing your mandatory inspection checklist. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Brad hadn't just stolen credit for my work, had actively tried to undermine safety procedures that protected thousands of passengers daily. The moment that sealed Brad's fate came when Emma herself entered the conference room. Shed requested permission to speak, and it agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. I need to apologize to everyone, Emma began, her voice steady but filled with remorse. I was completely unprepared for this job, and my inexperience put people at risk. But I also need you to know something about Brad. She pulled out a folder of documents. These are emails and text messages between Brad and me over the past 3 months. He coached me on what to say during my interview with Patricia. He told me Carrie was deliberately making operations look complicated to justify her salary. He said taking over would be easy because Head already learned everything from watching her work. Emma's next revelation stunned everyone. Brad promised me that once I was established as operations manager, we'd implement efficiency improvements that would reduce staff by 20%. He had a list of employees he wanted to eliminate, supposedly because Carrie had been protecting underperformers. The list included some of our most experienced and dedicated people, Janet, Tom, Miguel, and several others who'd become the backbone of Mountain Sky's success. He was going to fire all of you, Janet asked incredulously. Within 6 months, Emma confirmed. He said Carrie had made the department bloated and that modern management techniques could accomplish the same results with fewer people. The room erupted in angry conversation. These weren't just jobs Brad had been planning to eliminate, these were careers, families, and livelihoods of people who devoted years to making Mountain Sky successful. Tom stood up again, his face red with fury. Carrie, I've been fixing planes for 28 years. I've worked for 4 different airlines. Brad doesn't know the difference between a hydraulic pump and a fuel injector, but he was going to decide who stays and who goes. The twist that transformed our meeting from tense to triumphant came when Patricia Hayes herself appeared in the doorway. Carrie, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I wanted to share some news with everyone. Patricia entered with a confident smile. This morning, the FAA completed their operational review ahead of schedule. Mountain Sky's safety certification has been fully restored. Additionally, our Friday and weekend performance under Carrie's leadership has been so impressive that Atlantic Airways has withdrawn their application to take over our Denver to Phoenix route. The room exploded in cheers and applause. Patricia continued, I also wanted you to know that our stock price has recovered completely. were actually trading higher than before last Thursday's difficulties. But Patricia saved the best news for last. The board has approved funding for Carrie's proposed expansion of the operations department. We'll be hiring 2 additional senior coordinators and investing in upgraded weather analysis systems. Additionally, everyone in this room will receive a bonus equivalent to 1 week's salary in recognition of your loyalty and professionalism during a very challenging time. As my colleagues celebrated around me, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete professional satisfaction. Not just because I'd been vindicated, but because the people who'd supported me were being rewarded for their faith. Emma approached me as the meeting was ending. "Carrie, I know I have no right to ask this, but could I stay with Mountain Sky in a different role? Yesterday was terrifying, but watching you work taught me more about leadership than 2 years of business school." I looked at this young woman who'd been used as a pawn in Brad's scheme. Her honesty and willingness to learn impressed me. "Emma, I think I have the perfect position for you." 3 months later, Mountain Sky Airlines was operating at levels of efficiency and profitability we'd never achieved before. My expanded operations team had streamlined processes while maintaining the rigorous safety standards that protected our passengers and preserved our reputation. Emma had thrived in her new role as customer experience coordinator, using her business education to improve passenger satisfaction and resolve complaints. She'd proven that being in the wrong position doesn't make someone incompetent, it just wastes their potential. But our success had attracted unwanted attention. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October while I was reviewing winter weather preparedness protocols. Patricia's secretary asked me to come to the executive conference room immediately for an urgent meeting. Walking in, I found Patricia sitting across from 2 men in expensive suits who introduced themselves as lawyers representing Atlantic Express Airlines. "Carrie, these gentlemen have brought us a rather unusual proposal," Patricia said, her tone carefully neutral. The lead attorney, a thin man named Harrison, slid documents across the polished table. "Miss Carrie, Atlantic Express is prepared to offer you a position as Senior Vice President of Operations at a salary of $200,000 annually, plus stock options, and a signing bonus of $50,000. I glanced at the contract without picking it up. "That's a generous offer. Why are you making it?" The second lawyer, younger and clearly nervous about this conversation, answered honestly. "Mountain Sky's operational performance over the past 3 months has been extraordinary. Our analysis shows that your innovations could revolutionize how regional airlines manage complex logistics. You want to hire me to implement Mountain Sky's systems at Atlantic Express." "Essentially, yes," Harrison confirmed. "We believe your expertise could give us a significant competitive advantage." I leaned back in my chair, studying these men who were trying to buy the knowledge I'd developed over 16 years. "And what happens to Mountain Sky when I leave?" "That's not our concern," Harrison replied with corporate coldness. "Business is about acquiring the best talent available." Patricia remained silent, watching my reaction carefully. I could see the worry in her eyes. Losing me now would devastate everything we'd rebuilt. But the twist that changed everything came when Harrison made a critical mistake. "Miss Carrie, we should also mention that we've been monitoring Mountain Sky's operations closely. If you decline our offer, Atlantic Express is prepared to challenge several of your route authorizations through federal regulatory channels. Are you threatening Mountain Sky's business if I don't work for you?" "We prefer to call it competitive positioning," the younger lawyer said uncomfortably. I stood up, my decision crystallizing instantly. "Gentlemen, I need to show you something." Leading them to my office, I pulled up the comprehensive operational database I'd spent years developing. Charts, graphs, and real-time displays filled my computer screens, showing everything from fuel consumption algorithms to weather prediction models. "This is what you think you're buying," I said, gesturing at the complex systems. "But here's what you don't understand: this isn't just software. It's institutional knowledge built through relationships with 800 employees who trust me to keep them employed and keep passengers safe." Harrison studied the displays with obvious confusion. These appear to be standard airline management systems. Exactly. They look standard because I designed them to integrate seamlessly with human decision-making. The real innovation isn't the technology, it's the culture of excellence. I've built with people who've worked alongside me for years. I minimized the technical displays and opened photo albums showing company events, training sessions, and crisis response teams in action. Tom Brennan has been repairing aircraft since before you graduated law school. Janet Rodriguez can coordinate complex air traffic patterns in conditions that would terrify most controllers. Miguel knows the cargo handling requirements for every aircraft manufacturer we service. The younger lawyer was taking notes, clearly beginning to understand that they'd misunderstood what made Mountain Sky successful. You can't buy this, I continued. You can't replicate 16 years of building trust and developing expertise. You can hire me, but you'll get one person. Mountain Sky has 800 people who work together like a precision instrument. Patricia smiled for the first time since the lawyers had arrived. Shed understood what I was really saying. Mountain Sky's success wasn't dependent on any single individual, including me. It was built on shared commitment to excellence. Harrison gathered his documents with obvious frustration. Miss Carey, this offer won't remain open indefinitely. Regional airlines face increasing competition. You might not have opportunities like this in the future. I appreciate your interest, I replied politely, but am not interested in opportunities that require abandoning people who've supported me. After the Atlantic Express lawyers left, Patricia and I sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Carey, would you have seriously considered their offer if they hadn't threatened us? I thought about this carefully. $200,000 is a lot of money. But Patricia, I've learned something important over the past few months. Success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about building something meaningful with people you respect. And if they follow through on their threat to challenge our route authorizations, I smiled confidently. Let them try. Our safety record is impeccable. Our operational efficiency leads the industry, and our customer satisfaction scores are the highest in our market segment. What exactly are they going to challenge? The conversation that completed my professional transformation came when Patricia made her own unexpected offer. Carey, the board has been discussing succession planning. I'm 62 years old and considering retirement within 5 years. Would you be interested in preparing to become CEO of Mountain Sky Airlines? Chief Executive Officer. The possibility had never occurred to me during all those years of working nights and weekends to keep flights running smoothly. Patricia, I'm honored, but I'm an operations specialist. I don't know anything about finance, marketing, or corporate strategy. You know the most important thing: how to lead people who deliver excellence under pressure. The rest can be learned. I looked out my office windows at the runways, where aircraft operated with precision and safety that ID helped create. Can I think about it? Of course. But Carey, consider this: you've already proven you can transform an organization during a crisis. Imagine what you could accomplish with 5 years to prepare. Walking home that evening, I realized that my journey from a 20-year-old intern to potential CEO represented more than professional advancement. It demonstrated that competence, integrity, and commitment to excellence could overcome any betrayal or setback. Brad had tried to destroy my career by stealing credit for my work. Instead, his schemes had forced me to recognize my true value and demand the respect I'd always deserved. Sometimes losing everything teaches you that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you choose to respond when they underestimate your strength. 1 year later, I stood behind a podium at the International Air Transport Association's annual conference in Miami, holding the Aviation Professional of the Year award while 400 industry executives applauded. The crystal trophy caught the ballroom lights, but what moved me most was seeing familiar faces in the audience. Janet, Tom, Miguel, and dozens of Mountain Sky employees who'd flown down to watch me receive recognition for our collective achievements. This award belongs to every person who believes that excellence comes from doing the right thing, especially when nobody's watching. I said into the microphone, aviation isn't just about moving passengers from point A to point B. It's about keeping families together, connecting businesses, and proving that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they support each other. The journey from Brad's betrayal to this moment had taught me lessons I never could have learned during my comfortable years of taking credit for granted. Mountain Sky Airlines had become the most profitable regional carrier in America. Our on-time performance consistently exceeded 96%. Customer satisfaction surveys ranked us above airlines with 10 times our marketing budget. Most importantly, WED expanded our workforce to over 1,000 employees while maintaining the family atmosphere that made people genuinely excited to come to work. Emma had flourished in ways that surprised everyone. Her customer experience innovations had reduced passenger complaints by 67% while increasing loyalty program enrollment. Shed also married a pilot from Southwest Airlines who appreciated her intelligence and ambition. Carrie taught me that being in the wrong position doesn't make you incompetent. Shed said during her wedding speech, "It just means you haven't found where you belong yet." Brad's downfall had been swift and complete. Word of his intellectual property theft had spread throughout the aviation industry, making him essentially unemployable at major airlines. Last I'd heard, he was working as a dispatcher for a small cargo company in Nebraska, earning less than half his Mountain Sky salary. The woman had left me had moved on quickly once his career prospects collapsed. But the transformation that meant the most to me was personal. Patricia had announced her retirement 6 months earlier, and the board had unanimously selected me as her successor. At 33 years old, I would become one of the youngest female CEOs in airline history. The transition would happen gradually over 18 months, allowing me to complete executive training while maintaining operational oversight. Carrie, are you nervous about running the whole company? Janet had asked during our monthly team leaders meeting. Terrified. It admitted honestly, but I've learned that being scared of new challenges doesn't mean you're not ready for them. It just means you understand how much responsibility you're accepting. The award ceremony concluded with a reception where industry colleagues shared stories and exchanged ideas. Aviation professionals from around the world approached me throughout the evening, seeking advice about operational improvements and crisis management techniques. A young woman who reminded me of my 20-year-old self introduced herself as a logistics coordinator for a struggling airline in Phoenix. "Miss Carrie, how did you develop the confidence to stand up to people who were trying to take advantage of you?" I considered her question carefully. I didn't develop confidence, I developed clarity. Once I understood my actual value, I stopped accepting treatment that didn't match my contributions. The hard part wasn't finding courage, it was recognizing that I deserved better. What if you'd been wrong? What if Mountain Sky had succeeded without you? Then I would have found somewhere else that appreciated what I could offer. But I wasn't wrong. And deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. Sometimes you have to trust your expertise even when everyone else doubts it. Flying home to Denver the next morning, I reflected on how completely my life had changed since that devastating day in Brad's office. The termination that had felt like the end of my career had actually been the beginning of recognizing my true potential. The lesson wasn't just about workplace politics or professional advancement. It was about understanding that your value doesn't come from other people's recognition. It comes from the quality of work you do and the integrity you bring to every challenge. Mountain Sky's success story continued evolving every day. WED opened new routes to Seattle, Portland, and Las Vegas. Our employee retention rate was the highest in the industry. Financial magazines regularly featured articles about our operational innovations and corporate culture. But what satisfied me most was receiving letters from passengers whose lives WED touched. A businessman who made it to his father's funeral because we rescheduled a delayed flight. A military family reunited on Christmas morning, thanks to our coordination with other airlines during weather emergencies. A college student who got home during a family crisis because our staff went beyond normal procedures to accommodate her situation. These stories reminded me that airline operations isn't just about schedules and systems. It's about understanding that every passenger represents someone's most important journey. The future held challenges I couldn't yet imagine. Economic downturns, fuel price fluctuations, regulatory changes, and technological disruptions that would test everything Yudi learned about leadership and adaptation. But I faced those uncertainties with confidence born from surviving the worst betrayal of my career and emerging stronger. As our plane descended toward Denver International Airport, I looked down at runways where I'd spent countless hours ensuring safe and efficient operations. The airport looked smaller from 35,000 feet, but I knew every gate, every taxiway, and every system that kept this complex operation running smoothly. Patricia would remain as chairman of the board, providing guidance while allowing me complete operational authority. Emma had been promoted to vice president of customer relations, bringing fresh perspectives that complemented our operational excellence. The team I'd rebuilt was stronger, more innovative, and more committed than ever before. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the pain of Brad's betrayal. The answer is complicated. I regret the stress it caused my colleagues and the risk it created for passengers. But I don't regret the clarity it forced me to develop about my worth and my goals. That experience taught me the difference between being valued and demanding to be valued, between accepting credit and ensuring you receive credit, between hoping for opportunities and creating opportunities through excellence that can't be ignored. Most importantly, it taught me that loyalty and competence build something more powerful than individual achievement. They build legacies that outlast any single career. The plane touched down smoothly on runway 25 left, the same runway where I'd coordinated that emergency landing during Emma's first day. Ground crews guided us to the gate with precision that reflected years of training and dedication to safety. Walking through the terminal toward my car, I stopped to watch passengers hurrying to their connecting flights, families embracing after long separations, and business travelers focused on their next meetings. Each person represented a small piece of the vast network that connected communities across America. Tomorrow I'd return to my office overlooking these same runways, continuing the work I'd discovered I was meant to do, leading people who shared my commitment to excellence, building something meaningful that would continue long after my own retirement. The betrayal that had almost destroyed my career had instead revealed strengths I'd never known I possessed. Sometimes losing everything teaches you exactly how much you're capable of winning. I hope my story encourages you to recognize your own value and never settle for treatment that doesn't match your contributions. Excellence speaks for itself, but only when you have the courage to let it. What betrayal in your own life taught you the most about your strength? I'd love to read your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if it reminded you of your own worth, subscribe for more stories about finding strength through adversity, and share this with someone who might need to remember that their value isn't determined by how others treat them. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to triumph. Remember that your greatest comeback often begins with your most devastating setback. Keep building something meaningful, and never let anyone convince you to accept less than you deserve.